Hello. I shared with you Kamari getting the cattle out of the river and some of the exploits of Smokey a little bit. Thought I ought to share with you my military service because that was why Kamari was had Smokey and had to get the cows by herself. Vietnam was raging. Kamari and I had not been married very long, and I knew that the odds were I was going to get a draft notice, and I did. I didn't open it because if you don't open it, you're not obligated to that as far as military is concerned. So I went down and I joined the Army, guaranteed OCS. They had a college option program. If you had a college degree, you could go. And I decided I'd rather be an officer as become just a private in the Army and be what they called cannon fodder. So I went down and enrolled, and they sent me to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. Well, I have a bad hip that I got playing baseball and in rodeo that didn't work very well. The hip, the ligaments and tendons around the hip were loose, and so it would hurt if I did too much exercise. And so I got in the military and got through the basic training, and they sent me to Fort Sill, Oklahoma for my secondary training, which would be as a forward observer for artillery. And my hip had been bothering me, and in the little, what they call little OCS, this was prior, you had to go through all the basic prior to getting into officers candidate school. And so, but we did the same things that the officers were going to have to do. And which meant that at roughly 5 o'clock every morning, sometimes 4:30, we had to fall out and go for a 5-mile run. And then we had all different kinds of things, training that we went through that second 8 weeks of being in the military. And my hip began to bother me. Once I got it warmed up, it was pretty good, but when I'd lay down at night, it'd keep me awake. It hurt so bad. So I'd go on sick call, and they gave me some chocolate wafers that were painkillers. I was supposed to take one every 4 hours. And I had gotten to the point that I was taking a couple of them every hour to get to sleep. And one Sunday evening, I was able to call home and visit with Kamari, and it was hurting. And she asked me how it was, and anyway, I complained to her. I don't know that it was a complaint, but I said it like it was. The next morning, Monday morning, there was a Jeep pulled up to our company area at 7:15 in the morning, and we were all out, and there was a colonel there looking for Cadet Wynn. And I got in a Jeep with him, and he took me over to the base hospital in Lawton, Oklahoma, where Fort Sill was. And they x-rayed me from every angle you can be x-rayed. By 9 o'clock, I'm sitting in a front of a panel of doctors. There are 5 doctors in this panel, some of them colonels, some of them more higher grade than that. There was one general that were all doctors, and they were discussing my hip, and they had all the x-rays to look at. And so when they sent me back to my company area, I walked in and I had my file, and it had on the front of it in big red inch-high block letters, it said PI in red ink. And I handed it to the sergeant to check me back in, and he looked up at me and he says, "Who do you know?" And I said, "I don't know anyone." He said, "That PI means political influence." And then he opened the file and looked at it, and he said, "Lee, do you want to go to Vietnam?" And I said, "Not particularly." And he said, "Well, what I have here, I can send you home today." He said, "You can be home by night. They are discharging you with an honorable discharge because of medical reasons. You no longer qualify for OCS. So he said, but if you don't want to go to Vietnam, he said, go out and get in that company Jeep out there. And he said, told me where to drive out north of the post in Fort Sill to a firing range. And he said, there's a big cottonwood tree sitting at the corner of the intersection out there. And he says, you go park under that. And he said, don't you be back here before 6:30 this evening. Okay. So I got in the company Jeep and drove out there and sat there through some rocks and just sat there really for the rest of the afternoon. I got back to the company area, and what he told me was, he said, Lee, he says, again, you can be home tomorrow. But he said, if you are, he said, I'll guarantee you that within 4 or 5 weeks, you will have your draft notice again because you still qualify as regular Army, even though you've been disqualified to be an officer. And he said, but if you'll spend 3 days, then you will go out qualified as prior service, and they won't send a draft for you. So I said, by all means, And so every day I got in a company Jeep at between 7 and 7:15 in the morning, and I drove out onto the firing range and piddled around out there, took naps and threw rocks and all kinds of things until 3 days were up. And he came in and he gave me my discharge papers, and I went home. And when I got home, I asked Kamari, I said, Kamari, what did you do? I said, because they say I'm a political influence. And she said, I didn't do anything. I just called Uncle Jim. Well, as we traced it out, Uncle Jim was high up in the hierarchy of the National Democratic platform. And in the middle of the night, he had called Senator Kerr. Senator Kerr at that time was one of the more powerful senators in Washington. He was the senator from Oklahoma. Senator Kerr, at 1 o'clock in the morning, called the post commander at Fort Sill, Oklahoma, and said, you've got a Cadet Wynn there that's got a problem. Could you see what the problem is and take care of it and call me back by noon today? And so by noon, Senator Kerr got the recurring phone call saying that Cadet Wynn did indeed have a problem and that he's being discharged from the Army. So I got home. It was kind of a nice thing to be home. I even qualified for the GI Bill. I never would use it because I didn't feel like I had earned it. There's some experiences that I enjoyed in the Army, but through the training process. But anyway, that was my experience of being a political influence as well as an ex-Army man. So you have a wonderful day, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.